Hello, welcome everyone to this session for From Code to Coordination, Unleashing Your Inner Project Manager. A little bit about me. My name is Jennifer Ring. I have been at Blackbaud for almost 12 years now. I am located in Lakeland, Florida. I am a senior project manager and I specialize in Razor's Edge NXT, Financial Edge NXT, and payment service implementations. And I love the topic of project management, which is why I'm here talking to you all today. Today we're talking about how you can start thinking like a project manager and incorporating some basic project management strategies into your projects to help them be more successful. Some of the things we're going to cover, we'll discuss what a project manager is and what the role of the project manager is. And then just to help add some context to the conversation, we'll start talking about what is and isn't a project, and then some common methodologies that you might see. We'll then go through some phases of project management. We'll talk about how to get started. This is the first time managing a project, and then staying on schedule and benefits of project management. So some tips to set you up for success. Okay. And many of you may have already worked with a formal project manager, either within your organization or during a project with Blackbaud, if you have like a professional services project. But many of you are already doing project management and might not even know it. So many of you have done maybe some home renovations, or you have a hobby that you do outside of work, or you've had a wedding that you've had to plan, or just even chores and errands on the weekend. For all of those projects, you likely had to plan out or determine which day you were going to start, what tasks needed to be completed during the project, and you knew how much money you had to spend. So everyone has some level of project management, whether they know it or not. I will say what a project manager is not. We're not just schedulers. I think that's kind of a common misconception out there that we just work to schedule meetings, but there's a whole lot more involved. So I will apologize. I know this slide is a little wordy, but I wanted you all to have the information and have it left behind because the 5 I's are really important for project management. Insight is a really big one for me. Having a project manager really allows you transparency into the project. So you as a project manager have insight into the project, the deliverables, the timeline, the budget, any impacts and risks. And it's going to allow you to make informed decisions and identify trends. It really helps to increase proactivity and reduces reactivity. Influence, also another really big one. You get to use your persuasion skills to get everyone on the same page and agree to deadlines. You're also the motivator of the group. You keep them focused and on task, and the project team will really look to you as a leader for guidance and suggestions. Information is a powerful tool, and you will get a lot of information from your product team. Like I said, it gives you the insight that you need to really be able to make decisions, but also to inform your stakeholders and make sure that you have a full 360 view of your project. And then that last one, integrity. Oftentimes in projects, you may encounter team members or even an outside vendor that just loses sight of the end goal and may not want to participate or get along with others. And the PM wears many hats in a project. So oftentimes it's being that person that's there to listen, help resolve conflict, negotiate or help reach a compromise, or be the positive influence and support throughout the project. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I do want to provide some additional context into what a project is, just to kind of help set the stage for the rest of the conversation. So a project can really be any size, but what defines it as a project is it produces something. So there's an output or a deliverable, there's a start and end date, and you use resources. And that can be people, machinery, physical equipment, it can be a number of different things. A program, on the other hand, is a collection of projects, and it lasts for an extended period of time. So for example, if you think about a company that is implementing multiple software pieces at one time. So maybe they're implementing Razor's Edge NXT and Financial Edge NXT, and then off on the side here, we've got a new HR system. each of these are a project. There's a start and end to each one of them, and the deliverable is the system that you're going to be using every day, but the program is the collection of all the projects together. So usually you'll have like a program manager who's focusing on strategic planning, dependencies between the solutions, outcomes, and benefits. So a little bit different than a project or a project manager. And then lastly, we have operations. Operations are ongoing with no defined end. So once the project is complete, that's when you move into the operations phase. It's really focused on long-term efforts like maintenance and adjustments to the procedures. And then also I do want to add just a little bit of color around the different methodologies. There are several out there, but some of the most common are Agile and Waterfall. I know as developers, many of you may be more used to Agile methodology, or maybe you're using a little bit of a combination of both, but there are a lot of projects that benefit from the Waterfall methodology as well. So I wanted to take a look at some of the key differences between the two because they are managed a little bit differently. So with the Agile methodology, things are really not sequential. So we're focusing on the most valuable part of the project so we can create a minimum viable product. So for example, if you are building a house and you say the kitchen is the most important part of that, the kitchen's going to be built first before anything else is built. Agile methodology really focuses on time boxes or sprints. So you'll have maybe a 3-week sprint, and at the end of the 3 weeks, there's a tangible deliverable at each one of those. And then at the end of the sprint, priorities are reevaluated. So you're going to talk about what you're going to focus on next. And there's continuous feedback from your customer throughout the process, as well as retrospective. So you have a chance to really review what went well and what didn't. Waterfall is a little bit different in that it is sequential time order. So there's a beginning and an end. The project is created. All tasks are defined from beginning to end. So using our house example, we wouldn't just build the kitchen first. We would maybe build the foundation and the walls and the roof and then start doing the rooms inside. Each one has a dependency for what needs to be done before it. And the full deliverable would come at the end of the project. So the full deliverable would be the whole house rather than that first piece of it. And for Waterfall, we really rely on status meetings to review progress and ensure the schedule is on track. So we have clearly defined phases that we're tracking and reviewing and touching base on throughout the project. So let's talk a little bit about the phases of project management. These are going to be the most common phases that you'll use. And as you're getting started, it's important to be familiar with these 5 phases. So in the beginning, we have our initiation phase, which is really the beginning of the project. It's like the pre-planning, right? It includes defining the scope and the objectives. For this phase, you might be creating your business case or your project charter, defining the goals of the project, and then identifying key stakeholders and team members to determine the budget for the project. Whereas once we get into planning, that's where kind of a little bit more is going on. So we're choosing what type of methodology we're going to use because that's going to determine how we're going to plan the project. We're creating our project plan, or maybe we're defining the length of the sprints. We are assigning our resources, and then we're having a kickoff call. And I would say the kickoff call is such a critical component to this. It's really a 10,000-foot view of the project, where you get the team together, you introduce everyone, you discuss the roles and responsibilities, you review the overall process and timeline, and you discuss the next steps. It's really a great chance to get everybody on the same page and make sure that everyone is aligned going into the conversation and into the project. I also recommend also establishing your decision and change log right at the beginning. So this is a central location where you're going to document and track decisions and changes throughout the project, just like it sounds like. Sometimes when you are working on a project that spans a long period of time, decisions or project details might start to blend together, and it can be easy to forget why you made the decisions that you did. So logging them in your decision and change log really allows you to kind of keep track of those key decisions, who made them and why you made them. And it can also serve as kind of a parking lot for items as well. So if you have something you're not going to address right now, put that on your decision and change log, and then notate why you're not going to address it right now, so that 6 months down the line, when you come back to it and say, why didn't we do that? It'll be in there for you. The execute phase is really where things get into motion. So you're putting your project plan into action, your resources are kind of being coordinated and put to their tasks. You're communicating the timeline and the tasks to your team members. And then, execution might be in phases. So it might be in iterations or it could be in a combination of both. So you're just really starting to work through that project plan. Monitor and control is really where the project manager has more to do than you probably think. So, yes, things are in full swing and they're kind of on their way to progressing, but we need to keep track of where things are and we need to make sure that everything is running smoothly, it's on schedule, and that we're not going over budget. So, I would say the biggest thing for me throughout this process is like checking in or having status meetings with your team. It is so important to make sure that everybody's on the same page. I always say that the number one reason for failure is unclear expectations. So those status meetings make sure that one, everybody knows what's coming up next and they all know what those due dates are. So it's one thing to put it on the calendar and say, hey, this is due a month from now. But people will then forget or they may not realize it. And then the day comes and they're like, oh, yeah, that is due today. So having those regular check-ins or status meetings is a good chance to remind people of what's coming up and to make sure that you're staying on schedule. It's also a good chance for anybody to bring up any blockers or risks or anything that might cause the project to either get off schedule or to go over budget. You might also be having stakeholder reviews or executive steering committee calls during this time to let the leadership team know how things are going or your project sponsors. So those calls tend to focus more on the milestones that have been accomplished or milestones that are upcoming, any like risks that we have identified or could be causing the project to go awry. And then also reviewing the budget in depth to make sure that we're tracking where we are supposed to be or to call out if we're running hot on any of the hours and burning faster than we had expected. If you are an agile, you might be doing more retrospectives during the monitor and control, making sure that things are going as they should and identifying what could be done differently for the next sprints. And then the closure phase is truly the formal end of the project. This is where if you do have a waterfall methodology, you might be using this time to get your deliverable sign off. You're going to have your project closure calls. So I'll wrap up with the team to say, this is the formal end of the project. Are there any questions, anything that's outstanding? And then I always like to have a post-project review. So kind of a, what went well, what didn't go well, what should we keep doing, and what should we stop doing so that you make improvements for your next project that comes along. So getting started, if you have never done project management before and you're not quite sure where to start, there are a few key items that you'll want to do when you first get started. Up front, you want to define your success criteria. What does that look like? The best thing to do is use SMART goals, I always say, because it's specific, measurable, achievable, and time-bound. So examples might be 75% of employees are trained on the system the first week of go live, or maybe you are going to reduce administrative time by 30%, or we're going to have no downtime at the end of this. So getting those up front so that you know what you're working toward. Create your project schedule that kickoff call. Again, really important to get the team all on the same page. Or choose how often you want a deliverable. Are you going to have 2-week sprints or 3-week sprints? Making sure that the team knows what cadence they should be expecting as they're going through the project. And then this last bullet, creating a 1 or 2 sentence mission statement. So this is something to give the team something to rally around, something that describes the project, the goal of the project, something that everyone can relate to and get behind. So your mission statement should really be, what are we doing? Who are we doing it for? And when are we doing it? Your next step is to identify your team structure. So who is on your project team? The project sponsor or your project champion is critical to the project. They are the person that is going to be sponsoring the project. They're going to be your escalation point in case anything goes wrong. And they're going to be the person that you go to when decisions need to be made. If you have a change order or you need to do something with a budget, that's the person that you're going to go to for sign off. So very important to identify who that person is. The project manager hopefully is you. And then we've got two other groups of people. So our core team members are the people that are really involved throughout the process. They go to regular meetings. They might be involved in testing and submitting feedback. And they're along for the journey throughout the project. Your end users, on the other hand, are usually the people that will consume the end product. So if you're implementing new software, they're going to be the users of the software once it's rolled out and live. So you always want to keep that group in mind as well, because you'll still need to consider them for training and for any change management. And then define any additional resources. So we talked about the project team, but remember, your project might also have other types of resources like equipment or licenses or software programs that are needed, or product experts that come in and weigh in and are available throughout the project. So make sure you define those as well. And then on the right, we want to really start to establish our timeline and identify the tasks. So if you aren't 100% sure what you need to get from point A to point B, that's where you're going to lean on your experts. You're going to ask them, if we need to do this, what are the steps that you need to get there? And let them help you to create that schedule and those tasks that are needed. For Agile, we're going to define the most valuable part of the project. What is the thing that we need the most to get us started, and what's going to be the most valuable to our customer? And then when creating your plan, start with those large milestones and then detail the tasks that are needed to get there. So those are some examples of some of the larger milestones that we might see, like the initiation, planning. Maybe we're designing the software or the integration. We're developing that connection or that integration, and then we're testing it. We're training our users. We're implementing it, and then we're in our post-implementation period. So you'd start with those and then start to lay the tasks needed to get from each phase to the next. And some tips for success. So if you are starting to get into project management, there are a few words of advice I will give you that can really help if you're new to the role. That top bullet, establish yourself as the project manager. Let the team know that you're going to be leading them through the project. You should be telling them, like, hey, I'm your main point of contact. If you need something, come to me. Establish that you're the person to go to for problems, concerns, questions, or any big decisions that need to be made. You're kind of like the central command center of it. And run your project as you would like the project to be run. So don't try to force yourself to lead a project in the way that you've seen others running it in the past. Each person is unique and likes to run things a little differently. So this can apply to anything. Like maybe you want updates more often, or maybe you want to be a little bit more hands-on. It's whatever works for you, and just kind of communicating that out to the team. And then we've already mentioned you want a project schedule, and you want to schedule that kickoff call. During that kickoff call is where you're going to say, like, hey, I'm the project manager. Here's how you're going to utilize me. Here's my roles and responsibilities, and just making sure that you're setting that up at the beginning. Our second thing to do if you want to get things set up for success is identify risks. That we all know that no project is perfect. There are going to be things that go wrong, but the best thing you can do is start to brainstorm what things could go wrong, and then develop and incorporate mitigation strategies. It really helps, again, with that proactivity versus reactivity. Better to plan ahead for it and have a way to cope with it than for it to happen and be trying to react to it in the moment and having things get off course. And then the set expectations in the bottom. So these are some things that I think do come up often. So the first one, resources will be dedicated appropriately to work on the project and meet deadlines. I think you can see this a lot if you are maybe borrowing somebody from another department, right? They're going to help out, but making sure that that supervisor knows that the resource has to have time to work on the project. It's not, I'm going to do my regular job and then a couple hours a week I might work on this. So making sure that everyone understands that they need to be dedicated appropriately. Let them know that project management techniques will be used. We're going to use the phases of project management. We're going to have a schedule. We're going to have our regular meetings. And we're just going to run this in a more formal manner than we may have in the past. Input will be provided in a timely manner. It's also a really big one, in my opinion. And I would say when you are setting this expectation, set the time that you want that input to be provided. So maybe you say, hey, if I get a question out to the team, I really need an answer by the end of the next business day or by 2 business days. Don't leave it open for interpretation, because what's timely to you may not be timely to other people. So always make sure when you do need input that you're saying when you need that input by, or just establishing kind of like a service level agreement right at the beginning. And same thing for tasks and dependencies to be completed on time. That one might seem really obvious, but sometimes people don't understand that they just have like a small portion of the project that is really driving the entire project's timeline. Like there may be something that's dependent on that small piece. So communicating to the team that it's important that their tasks and deadlines are completed on time, because it's critical to the overall timeline of the project. And then for agile projects, again, establishing that delivery schedule right up front so that they know when they have to have something to show to the customer or to your internal team. And it's important to let the team know that the schedule and what to expect so that everyone is aligned going into the first set of deliverables. And then lastly, I'm pulling out the staying on schedule as a tip, because it's a question that I get a lot internally here at Blackbaud. How do you keep things on schedule? How do you keep it from getting off track? The reality is there is going to be changes to your schedule, but you try to minimize the impact of that. So staying on schedule does look a little bit different depending on what methodology you're using. So again, with the waterfall methodology, it's really your tools are going to be the team status meetings and the status reports. So checking in regularly and saying, here are the things that we've accomplished. Here are the things that we have coming up. And does anybody have anything that is, a risk at this time? Any reason you're not going to be able to get this done? So kind of checking in with the team often. Whereas for agile methodology, your tool may be daily stand-ups. So even if it's just 15 minutes in the morning, scheduling time with your team to report out on the progress or blockers. If you have two teams working on something simultaneously, maybe one team is waiting on the other team, that's a good chance for them to communicate that and say, hey, we can't proceed until you get your piece done. So it's just, again, another chance for the team to stay aligned, because it's going to be your best chance for mitigating any changes to the schedule. If the schedule does get off track, on the waterfall methodology side, we want to evaluate why it got off track. What was the root cause? And it's important to determine the root cause for two reasons. One, we need to fix the situation, but two, we want to prevent it from happening in the future. So figuring out what went wrong and why. And then we need to revisit the schedule and shift the timing around as needed. So a lot of times when I'm creating a schedule, I'll sometimes build in like little buffer spots just in case we do get off by a day or two. It doesn't impact the overall timeline. So I'm remembering to add that in there as well. And then do notify the team and stakeholders of any changes. If the schedule's shifted and some of your due dates have shifted, you want to let your team know that. Don't leave them thinking that the old schedule is still what we're going off of. So you want to make sure you're communicating any changes out. On the agile side, we're evaluating why the deliverable wasn't completed in the sprint. So now we need to say, hey, can we shift the deliverables or reprioritize in our next sprint? Are we going to be able to get it done then? What's slipping because of this? So it's kind of looking at your overall plan on what you were planning to deliver for maybe the first sprint, the next sprint, maybe the third one after that. And then asking, is there anything else that can be pushed to a later date? And again, very important to notify the team and the stakeholders of any changes. If you aren't going to have a deliverable to show, you want to make sure that's communicated out ahead of time and that you're setting expectations for what you're going to have for the next deliverable. Okay, and so I'm going to wrap this up today with this summary. Thinking like a project manager and adopting some basic project management strategies can really help your project be a success. And we've got our three main areas. We've got the improved project visibility into not only what's happening during the project, but any obstacles that are happening along the way. You have better risk management because you're identifying risks early and proactively, and you're mitigating it to avoid any additional costs or timeline changes. And then you have better stakeholder communication. Your stakeholders stay better informed through regular meetings and progress reports and have a better sense of what's going on and what's going to be coming. And that's all I've got.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. The one question that came up in our chat today was just if the slides would be available for download by any chance, if anybody wanted to use them and take it home with them, that would be so helpful.
So I know the session is recorded and you will have access to the recording afterward.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to launch the survey shortly. Please take a couple seconds to let us know what you think and enjoy the rest of BB Dev Days.
Thank you all.